If you voted for President Joe Biden because you thought he was the moderate alternative to the more radical elements in the Democratic Party, then you need to know that as of today, Joe Biden is the most radical pro-abortion head of state in human history. Let's talk. It took the president 224 days to actually use the word abortion in official documents coming from the White House. He talks about the right to choose and reproductive health care and access to women's care, but he's finally come out and stated what he's meant all along: the death of an unborn human being. You say, well, abortion's been legal for generations. What's so special about President Biden? Well, it's interesting that at the very moment when the pro-life movement is making more progress, more movement forward than it has in a generation, the pushback from the radicals is extraordinary to behold. Let me give you some examples. The House of Representatives this last week passed the most radical pro-abortion law in American history since Roe versus Wade in the early 70s. Now, that law has no chance of ever seeing the light of day as actual law because it can never survive a vote in the Senate. But it's symbolic of those who are scared to death of the progress being made by the pro-life movement. The testimony related to abortion as Congress looked at this law had Democrat Representative Cori Bush of Missouri, who said that her abortion was, quote, the hardest decision I had ever made, but she knew that it was, quote, the right decision for me. I wonder how her baby felt. Republican Representative Kat Cammack of Florida gave another perspective. She said that her mother had the recommendation of doctors that she have an abortion, but she chose life instead, and now that baby has become a congressman in the United States House of Representatives. This week, a federal judge prevented portions of an Arizona pro-life law from going into effect. This law would have pressed charges against abortion doctors who performed abortions specifically targeting babies with disabilities like Down syndrome. What's hypocritical about this judge's decision is that the judge said that portion of the law can't go into effect, but he upheld a separate portion of the law that acknowledges the personhood and rights of unborn babies. So what he's announcing is that babies with disabilities, Down syndrome children, don't have the same rights as other Americans. Michael Moses, another federal judge, this week temporarily blocked 3 pro-life laws from taking effect in the state of Montana. Now listen to the radical laws that he decided to block. These laws protect babies from abortion after 20 weeks of gestation. 20 weeks! To make a decision about abortion, but that's not enough. This law also regulated distribution of the abortion pill, one of the only pharmaceuticals in America that has virtually no oversight at all, and it also required doctors to ask women if they'd like to view an ultrasound of their unborn baby before aborting. Can you see how dangerously radical these laws are? We can't have the idea that there be any regulations at all on dangerous pharmaceuticals if it's related to abortion. We can't even suggest that a woman look at an ultrasound because she might be persuaded that there's a real human being inside of her. And we don't want to protect babies after 20 weeks because that's clearly not long enough to determine whether or not I want to kill that baby or not. Well, the highest profile example comes in the state of Texas, where the Texas heartbeat law was put on hold this week. U.S. District Judge Robert Pittman, who was an appointee of President Barack Obama, ordered judges in the state to ignore the law while it is under a lawsuit from the Department of Justice. This is what he wrote. He wrote that he would, quote, not sanction one more day of this offensive deprivation of such an important right. You know, it seems like when it's conservative judges making rules, the left loses their minds because so-called unelected judges are interfering with the clearly expressed will of the people. Here's a law passed overwhelmingly with approval from the people of Texas. But there's one Obama judge who's decided that he knows better than anybody else. There is a case coming to the Supreme Court this fall. The case is entitled Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. It's a case coming from the state of Mississippi. Folks, pay attention to this when you see it in the news, because this is the best challenge to Roe versus Wade that we have had in a generation. This is a critical law. Mississippi passed a law that argued that they could ban abortions after 15 weeks, except in cases of medical emergencies or severe fetal abnormality. 15 weeks. That's how long in Mississippi you still have to choose abortion. And yet, the left can't allow even that. It can't allow any restrictions at all. In fact, they're faced with a really strange dilemma. They're trying to gain the high moral ground by taking abortion from a legal option to the place where it is regarded as a moral good. They're screaming about how good their abortions are. They're having protests where they're standing and in front of a microphone and giving testimony about how proud they are that they had an abortion. The problem is, except for the most radical among us, they ignore the fact that overwhelmingly women following abortions have serious mental, emotional, and spiritual regret. Post-abortive women, statistics and research show us, have desperate struggles with guilt and remorse. But that doesn't matter. We have the audacity to argue that not only should abortion be legal with no restrictions whatsoever, but it should be universal. And by universal, I don't mean across America. We mean across the world. Part of my criticism of President Biden is that he has signed on to an agenda that promotes abortion across the globe, what one African writer called ideological colonialism. See, the left is real quick to argue that all cultures are equally valid, that Christians shouldn't send missionaries, that we shouldn't try and tell other cultures how they should live, and yet that's precisely what's happening with gender issues and abortion. Western cultural norms like comprehensive sexuality education for school children and the promotion of contraception and abortion in an unrestricted way to girls is being pushed across the African continent today. Now, while it's good that we would work to help end child marriage or prevent practices like female genital mutilation, the fact is, under generic terms like bodily autonomy, the United Nations, in cooperation with the United States, is pushing a sexual orientation, gender identity, transactional sex, surrogacy agenda through what is called the United Nations Population Fund. While abortion is legal in the U.S. and in Europe, many societies in Africa are very pro-life in their culture, and they do not condone abortion, and they don't appreciate its imposition. Well, how's it being imposed? It's being imposed because the United Nations, with the Biden administration, is beginning to require changes of abortion laws in African countries as a condition of receiving humanitarian aid. If the mob were doing it, we'd call it blackmail. We're telling other sovereign nations that they must, quote, move from rhetoric to action. They must achieve the targets that we've established, or we won't give them any help. The goal is to create safe and legal abortion by 2026 in every nation in the world. The Biden budget earmarks for international, quote, family planning the highest amount of money that's ever been given. It is essentially a brand new slush fund that has been created for international pro-abortion organizations like International Planned Parenthood and the Marie Stopes International Organization. They are now unconstrained from promoting global abortion policies with United States taxpayer dollars. It is ideological colonialism. So, well, Pastor, you're starting to get a little bent out of shape. Yeah, I am. Because I've been fighting this fight my whole life. And frankly, I'm about to change my tactics. I've spent decades arguing against abortion on the basis of the sacredness of human life. I've talked about how life is created uniquely in the image of God, that there's value to every life, that every baby is a special and unique creation by the hand of God with a purpose and a plan for that life, and that we should allow those lives to be born as an expression of trust that the future of the planet rests with the next generation of those who walk on it. Statistics tell us that we're now promoting abortion even at the expense of our own survival as a nation. We have dropped in our reproduction rate. Women are having, over the course of their lifetime in America now, 1.64 children. That is well below the 2.1 children per childbearing woman that is necessary to just break even on population growth. We are actually damaging our own future. The United States needs babies, and we need them now. And at the very time that we need them, we are pressing harder and harder into this hellish lie that our convenience and our comfort allows us to murder children. I don't read passages like this very often. But if we're going to have the counsel of the Word of God, we've got to have the whole counsel. Let me read you a couple of passages, just so that you can see how serious this is. In the book of Leviticus, in chapter 20, the first 5 verses say this. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, You shall also say to the sons of Israel, anyone from the sons of Israel or from the strangers residing in Israel who gives any of his children to Molech shall certainly be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I will also set my face against that man and will cut him off from among his people, because he has given some of his children to Molech, so as to defile my sanctuary and to profane my holy name. If the people of the land, however, should ever disregard that man when he gives any of his children to Molech, so as not to put him to death, then I myself will set my face against that man and against his family, and I will cut off from among their people both him and all those who play the prostitute with him by playing the prostitute with Molech. Let me give you the historical significance of Molech. Molech was a pagan god in Canaan who demanded the sacrifice of children. God, of all of the false gods in all the surrounding nations, God went out of his way to specifically identify this false god as one that was most offensive to him. Generations later, in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet says this. God gives Jeremiah some instructions, and he says, Go to the valley of Ben-Hinnom, which is by the entrance of the potsherd gate, and proclaim there the words that I tell you, and say, Hear the word of the Lord, you kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. Behold, I am going to bring a disaster upon this place, at which the ears of everyone that hears of it will tingle, since they have abandoned me and have made this place foreign and have burned sacrifices in it to other gods that neither they nor their forefathers nor the kings of Judah had ever known. And since they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, a thing which I did not command nor speak of, nor did it ever enter my mind. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place will no longer be called Valley of Ben-Hinnom, but rather the Valley of Slaughter. And I will make them fall by the sword before their enemies and by the hands of those who seek their life. Folks, here's the bottom line. We've played nice in this abortion debate, but I'm here to tell you that America's days are numbered. We have spit in the face of God to the tune of tens of millions of babies sacrificed to the secular God of convenience and comfort. And God will not be mocked. And we have a president that is not content to make it legal here. He has to evangelize it around the world. Imagine that. They've been telling us for years that we were colonialists because we took a message of the gospel to nations that had never heard it before. We were imperialists. And now they are taking nothing short of wicked evil and packaging it and selling it and strong-arming it so that the whole world is guilty of murder of the most innocent on our planet. Folks, there's no other way to dress this up. If you're not for life, then you're against God. Don't give me that baloney about how the Bible is pro-choice. I've read all the arguments. I've seen all the articles. The fact of the matter is, you are shameful if you try and get a pro-abortion message from a book like the Bible that is from start to finish an acknowledgement that God is the creator and that He makes life and it is sacred to Him. And He will deal with those who take babies and throw them in the waste bins because they're inconvenient to us. We better figure out how to get this one right, or our days as a nation are numbered. And I'm telling you, that clock is already ticking. This is Truth Currents.